Hi everybody, my name is Aya. I am the manager for policy advocacy at WomanKind. Oh, I'm sorry. I was taking a lot of notes, so I'm going to have to look at this. My name is Aya. I am the manager for policy advocacy at WomanKind. We used to be called the New York Asian Women's Center, and we've been in New York for close to 40 years now, and we serve survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. And I brought some information and materials so that y'all can have it somewhere to hand out as resources. But one of the reasons that I hesitated to put out the materials now is because it's precisely about this conflation of issues, and I didn't want to put out material about domestic violence, sexual violence, and trafficking because so often the problem is conflation of all of these things. There's conflation between labor trafficking, sex trafficking, trading sex work, massage parlor work, and that really hurts a lot of the work that we try to do, which is to really support individuals who need any sort of support in whatever way, right? And our model, our tagline is rising above violence. And in order for us to do that, we always have to center the voices of the individuals that we're trying to serve. And so that's just why one of the reasons I didn't put out the materials, because I didn't want all of those things to be conflated. I mean, it does become very frustrating when one of the jobs that we have to do as a service provider is to actually try to untangle all of these things, because it just makes our jobs harder. Why do we have to fight against other service providers or government agencies that are trying to support our work when so much of our work has to go into, no, what you're doing is actually conflating all of these things and you're actually hurting the very communities that we're trying to support. So that I just want to really highlight this issue when you do come into this space as an ally, as I do, as a service provider. I think it's really, really important to think about what is the actual issue we're trying to talk about. And I think, one of the really frustrating things about Councilmember Ku's event that happened was that, it's saying this is how you spot and fight human trafficking, but in reality, it really just seemed like, no, this is how you spot sex work and people trading sex, and this is how you combat sex work and people doing massage parlor work. That's what the content felt like as a service provider, and I think that's, as allies, I think it's always really important to understand how are we really framing the issue, and what is the issue that we're trying to fight, because I would have been much better off if Councilmember Ku had said, the event is about how to spot sex work, and this is how we're going to combat sex work. If he had been straight up about it, then I would have felt like, all right, fine, that's what you're doing, and that's true to the content of what you're presenting. But what was painful for us as service providers was actually you're trying to sell this as an event to fight and spot human trafficking, but it's really conflating so many things, and that was what was really frustrating about that as a service provider. And really for me, it's as an ally, I'm always so humbled to be in a space with individuals with that's really open to sharing their stories and their lived experiences, and I think that's really, really crucial for all of us. When somebody is sharing their lived experience, whether it's about trading sex, whether it's about actually being trafficked, whether it's about being a survivor of domestic violence, I think that is something as service providers and allies in this fight to always just be so humbled that somebody is actually willing to share those stories with us, and I don't think we do enough of that. And I think, it's like, okay, if you can't even listen and honor what the communities that you're trying to serve are saying, and you're not willing to listen to them as the first and foremost the voice of that you should be listening to, then why would you even be claiming to support the community? I mean, if you're saying I want to fight for this community, I want to fight alongside this community, why wouldn't you put that community's voice first? Why would the first person you're relying on be a service provider like ours, right? Like, so I think I'm not saying don't talk to service providers, because I think we do try our best to lift up the voices of the people we serve, but I think it's always a really important practice to really keep on questioning yourself as an ally. Okay, if I'm not even willing to believe and honor the voices of the people that we're claiming to serve, then maybe there's something wrong here. Maybe I'm not doing this right? So I really want to highlight that. Our organization, WomanKind, we've been doing anti-trafficking work. We added the anti-trafficking work to our programming, I think around 2009, or a little bit before that actually. But we've been in the human trafficking intervention courts in Queens as a service provider since 2009. We've recently joined the steering committee for Decrim New York, which is really fighting to, one of the main things we're trying to do is to decriminalize sex work. And there have been a lot of surprised responses from some people saying, wow, like, you're an anti-trafficking organization and you're also standing for decriminalizing sex work. Like, how does that even happen? And our response is, we just listen to the people that we serve. And the people we serve have a whole range of experiences. We have a lot of individuals who have been trafficked, but, if we're looking at numbers, a majority of those have been labor trafficked, not sex trafficked. And of course, there are individuals who have both been labor trafficked and sex trafficked as well. But we also have a lot of individuals who have been trading sex as a choice, but then again, the choice could be a range, right? It could. A lot of the individuals that we serve, a lot of times trading sex is a logical choice. It might not be their number one choice if they have this whole range of options. But in the situation that they're in, it is still a logical choice, and they have made a decision to do it. And that is what's important to us as service providers. And we will never be willing to shame that decision, because that is a choice, and it's about self-determination, and it's about autonomy. And if we're not honoring that, then what are we doing? What service are we trying to provide? What support are we trying to provide, right? I think another thing that I just want to highlight is one of our comrades in like the Decrim movement that I really look up to, and I think a lot of us look up to Kate D'Adamo. She made this comment about how, everybody, all the service providers and law enforcement and government and society says, like, how do we find these people? Why are they hiding from us? Or not why are they hiding from us, but why can't we find these people? How do we spot these people who have been exploited and who are in these horrible situations? And Kate was like, well, maybe they're just hiding from you because there's a reason that you can't see them, is because they're not just hiding from the government or law enforcement, but maybe they're really just hiding from you. And maybe we should, as allies, really think about what can we do better so that we are actually building trust with or investing in having communities feel safer, and how do we actually go and build that trust? Because I think one of the questions that we get, and I think some folks may have raised this, is, okay, well, what do we do then? How can we spot individuals? How can we spot these bad situations? And when we look at the communities that we serve and the individuals that we serve in the anti-trafficking program, at least 80% of the folks who are actually identified as being trafficked, they did not come through the human trafficking intervention courts. They did not come through law enforcement. They came through word of mouth, like through their own community, through other massage parlor workers, they're the close-knit community. And that actual referral or word of mouth wouldn't have happened if that trust didn't exist. And so I think that's really telling about how important trust building is, and then just really thinking about, as allies, how can we invest in the communities and the directly impacted people being able to feel safe and creating communities so that they can actually, the people with the real knowledge can actually then connect individuals who may need support to the appropriate individuals. That's like just really generally, I mean, I'm just really, again, I'm just always just really so honored to be in these spaces, and I think one of the things that we know not to do is there is a frenzy, as they've really pointed out, and I think all of you in the community know, there is a frenzy about, oh my gosh, there's like sex trafficking everywhere in Flushing, oh my gosh, we're a hot spot, what are we gonna do, what are we gonna do? And if you really do want to do something, one of the things is, please don't call the law enforcement, as you've heard, right? So, but then, and then if you're thinking, okay, but I do want to call somebody, then, you know, I think massage parlor workers, as well as people who trade sex, already have a list of sort of trusted resources. I think there are websites, right, that's accessible to everybody, that they also share among themselves, saying these are service providers or individuals or organizations that we trust. And at WomanKind, we are working to be on that list, really. And I think that's what we as allies should be doing. Like, it should be an honor to be placed on that list of trusted people, right? And so you know, it's again coming back to, if you are an ally, you know, think about like what it really means to be invited into the space, and what does it mean to really honor the directly impacted folks, and then you know, one thing to not do, just don't call the law enforcement in a frenzy. And there are already lists of organizations that are trusted that you can call instead of calling law enforcement, right? So yeah, so that's all I have for now.
Thank you to all of our speakers for being so generous with their stories.
Can I say one thing? One way that I always found is good to explain this. One way that I found is really good to explain this whole thing is that I am illegal because it is illegal to buy services from me. So one of the things that Ronald Reagan did with his amnesty bill is he made us illegal, because he made it illegal to buy services and buy labor from illegal immigrants. He criminalized the demand, the employers, and that made us illegal. So that is what a lot of these sex trafficking organizations, abolitionist groups are advocating for. They advocate for end demand, and that means it would be illegal for you to buy sexual services. And that's going to make the worker themselves illegal, like it has done to me, my parents, and the 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country. It makes people illegal because they can't sell their labor, and that makes their livelihood illegal, and that makes their lives illegal. And they can't really exist in society normally. So what they have to do is they have to network and find ways to survive. And often what that does is it creates these underground networks with coyotes and smuggling organizations, underground employers that will take them. They stand on street corners and wait for employers to come in trucks, pick them up. They'll take any work that they can get, and that is how they create networks so that they can survive. So if you want to be an ally, like she said, you have to get on that list. Become a person that they can trust, because they build those networks themselves, and some of those networks are good, and some of those networks are bad. Some of those networks are nonprofits like No More Deaths. They provide water and food and beans to people who are crossing the border. They are currently being persecuted by the US government. 4 of them are being given charges for leaving behind property. That's how they define leaving behind humanitarian aid. But you want to get on that list of people that migrants trust. Be a lawyer that they can trust. Like, I know this guy, he helped me out. And they'll talk to their people and they'll create those networks. Sometimes you can make a network online and you can have people like me find it and we know that we can trust you. So creating those networks is really important and we will find you. But unfortunately, we are illegal and we are criminalized as people, as undocumented immigrants and as sex workers. So that's why I can't give you an easy answer of how to stop slavery. I can't, because we have to build these underground channels of support. But that is why the end demand criminalization of buyers doesn't work, because it hasn't worked for undocumented immigrants. It has made us illegal. So I hope that makes it a little bit more understandable.
So, questions? Ron?
Yeah. So one of the things that I was struck by, building off of that idea of the alternative network. Sorry. When you all were talking about the idea that, who is using these massage parlors? It's the manual laborers who have been cut off from the culture, and not only from the culture, but from full economic participation in the dominant economy, such that these parlors may perhaps be the only way they can get not necessarily what we would call ideal medical or therapeutic care, but certainly medical and therapeutic care of a kind and of a, that is essential to them at this point. And it becomes a question of either how do we integrate that into the dominant economy, or acknowledge it as a full and legitimate alternative?
I think when the Page Act was passed, it ended open borders, because we used to have open borders. And it was also the first federal law against prostitution. So, you're right. It created this idea that certain people don't belong here, and that meant that they couldn't really make families. Because when you are criminalized, if you leave the country, you're banned. So if I leave the country today, I can leave. I can go back to Honduras. But I'll be banned for 10 years automatically, just by crossing that line. And that is why we are stuck. When we had open borders, you could come here, you could work, you could go back, you could take that money and build a home back home. So people would just go in and out. And you had an economy. That's what you had when you had more open borders back in the day. But after the Page Act, that disappeared. And they started putting penalties. And because of those penalties, people couldn't just leave anymore. All of a sudden, you came here to do work, now you can't go back to your family. And that connection that you had with your family or that you may have had with a spouse disappears. So you don't have the regular love or care that you used to have in order to keep working horrible labor work. And sometimes you need relief. Like, no one likes to talk about it in these terms, but imagine if your family was back home and you were trying to support them, and that's how most immigrants live their lives. That's how my parents did for a very long time. Imagine what that does to you. And, you can't really have the same joy that other people have. You can't drive legally. So you can't, have fun and enjoy yourself after a long day of intense labor out in the fields or doing, labor-intensive works that immigrants tend to do. So usually they use the services of, of sex workers, just like what happens to military people who are overseas. They don't see their wife, their girlfriend. They don't have that relationship with women. And that need builds up. And that's why a lot of military bases, they have a lot of sex workers nearby that work there. That's just the reality. No one likes to talk about it, but it's there. And it's because we have denied these people the right to have families and their humanity and work respected in this country.
Sorry, can I just add on one line to that? And when we say decriminalization, we're not trying to decriminalize violence. We're not trying to decriminalize trafficking, right? So I think it's really important to keep that in mind, right? So again, how are we identifying the issue, and how are we trying to put solutions to it, and is it actually the appropriate solution? So.
I just have a quick question. So Nevada has legal prostitution.
Here, I actually used to work there.
How is that working?
So can I?
Yeah, oh, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I used to work at the brothel, actually. I actually met what was his name? The guy Hoff, I think, the one who owns the brothels there.
Dennis Hoff.
Yeah, Dennis Hoff. I met him before he passed away. I used to work there. I only worked there for like 2 weeks. I did not like it. So basically, the way that legalized prostitution works in Nevada that I have worked at, you have to be able to afford the legal fees to do it legally. So Daniel Hoff is very wealthy. He's a wealthy man. So he built up these, what are they called? The brothels, the buildings themselves. He made sure they all passed the code of legalized prostitutions that were in place by law in Nevada. So you need a lot of money to be able to establish that, get the license, make sure that the housing has all the codes. And then he came up with the guidelines of how the whole thing was going to work. So when you go there, you have to apply, you have to be able to work legally, you have to get STD testing. They have to approve you. So because he owns all these places, he has to approve you in order to work at one of the brothels. And they take 50% of whatever you make. It's usually really expensive. You can charge like $1,000. Out of that, you get like maybe $500 and plus taxes.
Do the girls themselves need a license?
Yeah, you have to get a license.
The women, I should say.
Yes, I had to get a license from Nevada. So you went to the police station, they gave you a license. There was like a bell that was rung every time a customer would come in, so you would line up. There was also a limousine that would take you out every time like you wanted to go get snacks. You have to wait for the driver to come out because you were really far away from any. So you have to be far away from any schools, any like life. So you're in the middle of the desert. You're nowhere near Vegas. That's how all the buildings work. But I didn't like it. It was very bureaucratic. They took a huge chunk of your profits. And the truth of the matter is that prostitution is still illegal there. Because unless you are rich and you own all the brothels and the person approves you to work there, you are illegal. So you understand? Like most women can't afford those fees to work. And then if they don't get approved, then you're stuck working underground.
So we talk about kind of like a big difference between a decriminalization framework and a legalization framework. Legalization will have all of these sort of registration fees and, both require some degree of legalization. I want to bring in the example of New Zealand and why they were very thoughtful about the kinds of laws they passed in their decriminalization laws. So one, they made fees very, very low, so it's super accessible, and they made it so that businesses have to be small. You can't have like a giant, owner of like multiple businesses doing like the Walmart of sex work. Instead, like workers are empowered. If you want to have a third party person, which is the name for like a manager, they work for you rather than you working for them. And so having that type of licensing in place so that like it's very, very clear what your role is. You are assisting these people. You are not in charge of these businesses is really important. Making sure businesses are small and making sure there's a wage rate that doesn't like get people competing to the bottom, but is set at a base that is dignified is really important. Also, no mandatory health checks. That through people aren't like being forced, but like encouraged for protection, and that sex workers always have a right to say no and always have a right to use condoms or to right to refuse. These were written in. There's a couple of other ones that are very, very thoughtful. Every part of their creation of the law, such as, for example, registering to be a licensed sex worker, you go onto a list that is completely protected, so only that department that works on that registry can have access to that. No one else can. That's super important because in Germany, they have decriminalized sex work, but the registry to get access to healthcare for sex workers is open, so people aren't willing to actually register. They would rather not have services, rather than not be illegal, to work illegally than to be permanently stigmatized in that way. And so making sure that's protected. If you're registering with the government as a sex worker, nobody can know. And then on top of that, they even have discrimination codes that say if it is illegal to discriminate against the former status of a sex worker. So it's the same as like if you're discriminated by race, by gender, by age. It is literally, it's on the code as you cannot say that just because someone worked in sex work before, you cannot exclude them from work, you cannot harass them in their current work. That's super important as well. So I feel like in our process of figuring out what decriminalization will look like in the United States, we have to be just as careful. And of course, this is a very different country. We are in a country of big Walmarts. We're in a country of Amazons, trafficking labor or whatever, and a lot of the people that are doing sex work are trying to escape exactly that. They're trying to escape big labor, right? They're trying to escape factories. They're trying to escape, Walmarts. They're trying, it's actually because of the informal way that sex work is organized that it is actually a little bit more liberating, right? We don't want to eliminate that by making sex work into another Walmart kind of operation. That would be the exact opposite of what we want to achieve, because that will actually eliminate that source of people, the ones that need to do it, will still have to do it illegally, and it'll eliminate that source of like empowerment through informality that sex work has been as a shelter for a lot of people. And so this is really important as we try to pass like legislation around decriminalization, that every little part of what that even looks like in all the different departments, from the health department to immigration to the criminal codes, is considered, because if you do it wrong, you get Nevada, right? And so,
Yes.
yeah.
Other questions?
Question. So how would you say the issue of trafficking connecting women rights and human trafficking? Human rights. Sorry.
How would I say that it's connected to human rights? I'm not sure I understand the question.
How is the issue of trafficking connected to women rights, human rights?
One thing you mentioned earlier about like militarized work and stuff, and people, I think it's really important that we understand that sex work is gender.
I think I know how to explain this. So I follow a lot of sex workers on Twitter, and I meet them in real life. A lot of people that work in the industry are also men. I know a lot of men who are escorts. I know a lot of men who, I used to work in the porn industry in Los Angeles as well. I've done pretty much every part of sex work. So I know a lot of men work in this industry. A lot of those men are also gay, and they cater to gay clients. They're also part of the LGBT community. Most of the nonprofit organizations do not allow men to get any services, despite the fact that they're often paid less. Most of the men that I have encountered have to take drugs, right here. They have to use that in order to stay hard to perform in the scenes that you see online, or to see a client, or they have to clean out their backside in order to meet with a gay client. They are really exploited, a lot of them. I can't even describe to you how horrific some of the things that I've seen, or some of the things that they told me. I've had one of my gay friends tell me that they were raped by a police officer, and they couldn't do anything. These organizations, a lot of them, don't see this as, they see it as a woman's problem. And they only house women who they then either put to work to try to teach them how to work in society, or they put them through a rehabilitation program. But that isn't open for men. So I think we need to, I think it's a woman's issue, but it's everyone's issue. And that's a problem, because when we talk about exploitation, for so long we think of women as these victims. And we kind of treat this industry as like a woman-only thing. But this is a worker issue. And the fact that we don't respect the women in the industry and we ignore everyone else is a huge problem in our society. So I think when we're talking about this issue, women's rights is important. Women have the right to choose, but we also have to respect the people in the industry, and we have to see them. We have to listen to them. Because the narrative we're creating now is very much, oh, the sex industry is just women and they're all these victims and this is the only way to help them is X, Y, Z. We should treat every single person as an individual and respect them as such.
And trafficking isn't just of sex trades. There's trafficking going on and there's also labor. And actually, if you look at the over and over, we keep saying that like domestic work, construction work, farm work is where a lot of this labor exploitation is happening. So we can transfer that attention and resources to immigrant labor in general and look at the bigger picture of why these abuses are happening. I think that's a good direction to put it. It's not that there isn't exploitation. There is exploitation, and I want to make clear that there's reason for concern in the sex industry and the sex trades, especially in the lower paid migrant sex trades, because people are more likely to get bad working conditions. So how do you approach it from, instead of using criminalization, which is a broad stroke approach, you arrest everybody, you need to have finer instruments for talking about where are the abuses happening, if it's hours that are too long, if it's not having clean premise places to work. These are labor issues, and we've developed a system to protect people's labor rights. And if we want to approach that from in sex work or in any other type of work, we have to have a better way of enforcing the labor rights of every worker, right? And that still needs to happen. I'm not saying sex work is not it's a really screwed up industry.
Yes.
I want to improve it.
I wanted to tell you about something really horrible in the porn industry. Because we've been talking about full service escorting, but I want to talk about porn for a minute. So porn is a monopoly. If you didn't know, most of it is free online, and it should not be free. It's not supposed to be. Most of the porn industry is owned by wealthy men who are not in the porn industry. They are in tech. So Pornhub is owned. I forgot his name, but he lives in Europe. This guy came up with the idea to make free internet pornography. You wouldn't have to prove your age, that you are legal. You didn't have to pay for your porn. You could just get it online for free. So he created a company called Pornhub. And he owns all the legitimate companies like Bang Bros. And all these. He started buying those companies that were actually porn companies based in Miami and LA. Those are the ones that have to be licensed and everything. And he also bought all the piracy sites. The piracy sites that anybody can steal the content and then upload it for free onto these websites. These websites are illegal. You're not supposed to be on them. But because nobody respects sex workers, they're allowed to exist. And they get paid because there are advertisements and viruses on these sites. These tech companies make bank. They make billions of dollars. So I think it's important to really listen to the people in those industries because they hate these guys. So we need to destroy monopolies. Because if you target the sex industry, you're never going to get to those guys. You won't. They work in tech. They've never been on a porn studio in their entire life. Most of them have never met a sex worker, ever. When Sesta Fosta passed, Pornhub was really happy. They went on Twitter and told them, hey girls, Sesta Fosta passed. Well, now you can use our Pornhub program. We'll pay you pennies, just like YouTube. They're trying to create a YouTube platform. So because women are being kicked off their regular income streams, Pornhub wants to exploit them using a kind of program that they created where you would upload your own content to them, and then that content is now owned by them, and they would give you a couple pennies, but they would really be profiting off of it. So these companies profit from criminalizing the industry, but the reality is you have to go after these companies and break up monopolies. And that's something we're not addressing here. In the UK, they just banned pornography. They're doing this thing where now they're going to be taking your ID, and they gave that power to Pornhub. So Pornhub is going to be taking people's ID, and they should not be a company that should be allowed to exist. They're an illegal company. They shouldn't exist. Because they are the reason why so many women in the industry that I've been have been suffering. They're not getting paid a lot for their labor anymore. And the real companies are actually dying. I've seen them go out of business. They can't pay the girls enough. So all these companies are dying and women don't have a lot of work. And they're really exploited. So a lot of them become homeless in LA. I had to experience that myself. It's horrific. And we've had a lot of deaths as a result of that. August Ames died when I was in the industry. She committed suicide in 2017. After that, 2 other porn girls committed suicide as well. It's a tragedy. But I think we need to address what these companies are doing and put the power back into workers. And what I would like to create is a system where none of these free porn companies exist. So in order to access this work, you have to pay for your porn and prove that you are 18 or older. No more free porn. Other questions? Sorry, I got a little intense.
Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. And thank everybody for coming. Well, I would just like to say thank you very much. So much to think about. Just the beginning, obviously. So I'm very honored you came. I'm very proud we were able to host you, and I hope you'll come back.
Thank you so much for having this space with us. It's been hard to find, like, if it's possible to have more platforms with other organizations that are on the other side, and if you can mediate that, like, we would welcome it, you know. But it's been hard to make that happen. So